Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, May the 16th, 2024. I was just about to start recording this video and I was having a quick look at the news and I saw that Robert Fico, the Prime Minister of Slovakia, has been shot. I think he was shot in the abdomen and he's in hospital. And so I am going to look at Robert Fico's chart to just see what was going on today. I wasn't planning on looking at his chart, but I thought I'd give it a go. I haven't done any preparation, so I'm just going to put up the chart when I come to that particular section of this video and just see what I can find. There were some other things I wanted to look at today. I wanted to consider the new Russian defense minister, who is Belousov, I think his name is. I wanted to consider the anniversary of the Cultural Revolution in China. Apparently it started on May the 16th, 1966. So I thought it would be a good idea to look at the beginning of the Cultural Revolution. I don't know exactly what time the Cultural Revolution started, but sort of a note was put out sometime on May the 16th, 1966, and so I'll sort of look at a noon chart set for Beijing. And who else? Yes, I also wanted to consider Antony Blinken. Antony Blinken, he's been in Kiev, and he was playing the guitar in Kiev in a nightclub. I don't know if that's actually particularly appropriate, and I thought it might be a good idea to consider what kind of person Antony Blinken really is. I have looked at his chart before, but he is the American Secretary of State, important person, probably one of America's least competent Secretary of States for some time, at least in terms of results. But still, I thought it would be a good idea to have another look at his chart. But before I look at that, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Thursday, May the 16th, 2024. So pictures up there, the sort of top left, that's sort of Antony Blinken peering. There was more of him, but on top right, I put up a picture of Robert Fico, who is the Slovak Prime Minister. I mean, I'm assuming he's still the Slovak Prime Minister. I don't know how badly he was hurt. I think he was shot in the abdomen. Bottom left, that is Belousov, the new Russian Minister of Defense, and bottom right, that is the bottom half of Mao Zedong's face. So turning to the position of the planets today. Now what's interesting today is I use an ephemeris, Raphael's ephemeris, and it has all the positions of the planets in the back, sort of the aspects, and it goes through every day, and it's really useful for if you want to get a list of all the planetary aspects day by day. And there's a blank. For 16th of May, as far as I can see, absolutely nothing. So does that mean that the 16th is going to be a completely blank day? Well, it certainly is a blank day in terms of no aspects. I mean, no major aspects. So that is something to bear in mind. There are, of course, some midpoints to consider. And the moon is in Virgo. You can see the moon is at 9 degrees Virgo at noon in New York on May the 16th. And so with the moon in Virgo, doesn't matter what your time zone is, moon is in Virgo today, very moon in Virgo day. So there are things that need to be sorted out, and I suppose many of us are going to be more sensitive than usual to material details, and we are going to want to get everything right. By the way, Robert Fico, he's a Virgo, so moon in Virgo didn't really work out for him. Hold on, when does the moon go into Virgo? I haven't even looked at the positions of the planet. Very quickly, I think that's an approximate chart of him getting shot. So, well, actually, moon was in when he was shot, because I'm recording this on May the 15th, the moon was in Leo, so the moon was not in Virgo when he was shot. So hopefully, as he's recovering, the moon will be in Virgo. So that's the moon. And I said the moon is not making any aspects. You can see that at noon, the moon is okay. It's applying to an opposition of Saturn, but it's not quite there yet. And it's again, you can see that it's applying to a trine of Venus, Uranus, Sun, and Jupiter, but it's not there yet. And the trine between the moon and Mercury it's kind of in the past. But I think we might be feeling a little bit of that moon trine Mercury, and maybe even the moon trine Venus. In fact, we might say, well, the moon is trine the Mercury-Venus midpoint. So there's a gentle influence there, very wide, but I suppose we can say that the moon is in an earth sign, which is Virgo, and Sun, Mercury and Venus are in earth signs, so is the Sun for that matter. And so that might make it relatively easy to communicate today, but provided we communicate in a way that is very straightforward. It's not a day for complication. We don't want to confuse people. We should just stick to the details. So I think that is probably the way to go about things. Also, the Sun, 26 Taurus, is probably getting a bit close to Algol. Let me just have a look at the fixed stars, where we are, how close that is to Algol. Yeah, the Sun is 0 degrees and 14 minutes away from Algol. Jupiter is still quite close to Algol. So, with the Sun on Algol, happens every year. It's not a particularly unusual event, but perhaps with Sun conjunct Algol, things are going to be a little difficult in some areas. There is a capacity for evil there with Sun conjunct Algol. There may be news of some disturbing event. Remember, Ras Al Ghul, the head of the demon. This is Perseus holding up the demon's head. And that perhaps is some of the symbolism. You can actually connect Algol with jealousy. So some of us may be attracting a bit of jealousy, but we need to make sure that we ourselves don't become jealous. All of us are capable of jealousy. But that jealousy with Algol, remember what happened to the Medusa? Originally she was beautiful, but she said the wrong thing, and a goddess got annoyed with her and turned her into this monster. And so it's often jealousy connected with the way people look, people getting jealous of each other because they're jealous of what they're wearing, what they look like. So that's something perhaps that we do need to be aware of today. And essentially, those are the main aspects. In fact, there isn't a main regular aspect today. Though, as far as midpoints are concerned, the Sun is still conjunct the Jupiter-Uranus midpoint. So, Sun on a Jupiter-Uranus midpoint would be about a sort of sense of freedom and optimism, and things certainly can be better. They can always be better. We just have to make the effort. Though that Sun Jupiter-Uranus on conjunct with Uranus Jupiter-Uranus midpoint has been around for some time. It was around yesterday. So it was around at the time, for example, when Fico was shot. And so with his shooting, who knows what was in the mind of the person who did the shooting, because I don't know. Was it a political attempt on his life, or was it someone who had mental problems? I don't know. But maybe they had sort of weird ideas that they, with Sun conjunct Jupiter Uranus, that they were freeing Slovakia of Robert Fico, which is not a particularly constructive way to look at things, is it? Additionally, we have Mercury conjunct the Venus-Mars midpoint. And with Mercury conjunct the Venus-Mars midpoint, the things we say can actually be very seductive. Words can be powerful, they can be attractive. And it's not the volume of words, it's how we say it. So if you're trying to persuade someone in whatever way, words can make all the difference. But you have to choose your words carefully. And maybe one word is enough. It's just enough for a word to be sufficiently suggestive. Although with these kind of things, it always works both ways. You know, you have to watch out with Mercury on a Venus-Mars midpoint for people who are very seductive, trying to get you to do things. It sounds very good on paper, but is it really such a good idea? Another midpoint at the moment is Saturn on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. We've got Saturn aspecting Mars-Uranus. I don't know how close that was when Fico was shot, but you get the image there. Mars-Uranus would be a shooting, someone being attacked, perhaps with guns. Saturn on it. Saturn is the mischief there. So we have to be careful how we go with Saturn aspecting the Mars-Uranus midpoint. Turning to the heliocentric picture, and we're looking at the heliocentric coordinate system. There we are. The Earth, there's the Earth, still very much opposition Uranus, opposition Jupiter. Remember that is the same as Sun geocentrically, Sun being on the Jupiter-Uranus midpoint. And so with Earth, opposition Uranus, opposition Jupiter, that is going to create a certain amount of tension. I think we're all feeling it. Something has to give. We're all sort of under pressure, and we're under pressure because we want things to be better. With Earth opposition Uranus and Jupiter, we want to be free. That's a strong feeling at the moment, and that Mars-Saturn conjunction now getting really close. Mars is at 11:44 Pisces, Saturn is at 12:18 Pisces. Remember, it's a heliocentric conjunction, but geocentric conjunction has already happened. I'm going to try to look at the Mars-Saturn heliocentric conjunction tomorrow in detail, but with that conjunction, it is all about death and destruction. You know, I suppose you could say that, one manifestation of the heliocentric Mars-Saturn conjunction, which had been getting closer and closer over the last few days, may have been the shooting of Fico, but we don't know. We don't know how bad things are. But there is still that kind of atmosphere we have with Mars and Saturn being conjunct. But we do have to be careful. I mean, Mars and Saturn can be dangerous, and I think there will be an obsession, a growing obsession with death and destruction. And I think that, a lot of people seem to feel now, and I'm sort of picking it up, that we're at the end of something. And I think I sort of get that from, for example, reading the comments on this channel. So the sense that it is no turning back. Things are just not going to get better. It's the end of an era. I mean, someone talked about perhaps the end of an epoch. And perhaps that's how we're feeling with this growing power of this conjunction between Mars and Saturn. That might, of course, mean that when the Mars-Saturn conjunction breaks up, people won't be quite so negative. Okay, so that's the heliocentric picture. I'm hoping, really hoping, that when I do my forecast of the 12 signs, I'm going to be briefer than usual, because honestly, there is less to say. There aren't any major aspects, but probably, as always, it'll be the usual length. So let's now turn to my forecast for the 12 signs. Switch the coordinate system. It goes back to normal, and there we are. So these are my forecasts for today for the 12 signs. For today being my forecast for Thursday, May the 16th, 2024. Aries, you want things done properly, and you are very focused on getting it right. And if people make mistakes, Aries, I think you're going to be aware of it pretty quickly. And I think it feels a bit unnatural, but it just seems to be that your sensitivity right now is heightened. And I'm talking about your sensitivity to material details. And when I say material details, I'm not just talking about money and things on a spreadsheet. I'm talking about the way things are ordered, the way things feel, the way things smell. For example, you might be more sensitive to pollution, to things in your environment. You're going to pick up on it quickly. And if it's not right, then Aries will kick into gear. That is perhaps about complaining. So you are going to be in the mood for complaining. Well, unless things are perfect. But perhaps you should hold fire. Just because something is wrong, just because something feels wrong, doesn't necessarily mean that it is wrong. Or even if it really is wrong, is it going to help? So if you are going to complain about something today, Aries, try to think through what is going to happen if you were to make that complaint. What could happen? How would it make things better? Now, if you reach the conclusion that it really would make things better, then fine, make your complaint. But if you're just complaining because you're angry, then just don't bother, I think, because it's just not going to do any good. Also, I know that there aren't many aspects today. Mars is aspecting the Sun-Jupiter midpoint. Mars is your ruler. Sun and Jupiter as a pair are quite optimistic. Their Sun and Jupiter are about thinking that things could be good, having a view that there is a vision out there that can be realized. So I think, Aries, you do perhaps need to try to look beyond some of the imperfections around you and perhaps to see the bigger picture. And then I believe, Aries, that you'll reach the conclusion that actually things aren't so bad. Taurus, you are now enjoying the moon being in Virgo. I think from your perspective, it's good, the moon being in Virgo, because the moon is in an earth sign, and so you're feeling quite grounded, and at the same time you feel that you're in a position where you can be useful and you can make things happen and you can change your world. And if you don't like something, you're in a position to change it. And at the same time, by attending to small details, you can actually make something look a whole lot better. So Taurus, if you are involved in, art, you think about art as being the broad creative process, but it's not just the broad creative process. It's still the creation of a finished product which has to look good. And attending to small details about in terms of the creative product can make all the difference. So, whatever that art is, I mean, it may be something straightforward like, I don't know, a piece of interior design, or you're painting a wall, or doing something in the garden. Just small details could make all the difference. And talking about the outdoors and gardening, it's a great day for plants and the environment, and working with plants and the natural world. With the moon in Virgo in an earth sign, you understand, really that the material details do matter, and material details are about, getting your hands dirty, dealing with the natural environment. And I think overall that is going to be, quite grounding for you. Though you are starting to think that things could change. Your inner revolutionary is gradually clicking into gear. And that is because Venus, which is your ruler, is starting to move towards a conjunction of Uranus. So I think that things are starting to stir up. You've already had this with, remember, the Sun, which is in Taurus, is in your sign, is conjunct with Jupiter, Uranus midpoint. So that's started to stir things up. And, how can things be better? Now Venus is moving towards a conjunction of Uranus. And I do think that your inner revolutionary is starting to understand what can be done. I don't think that today is the day for starting your revolution, but I think it might be a good idea to be thinking about it and working out what you can change and how far you can go. Because sometimes you do have to go over the top. That, I suppose, is the nature of being a Taurus. Though, if you go too far, you could, of course, cause a lot of damage. I mean, you think about I was talking about Saddam Hussein. He was a Taurus. Pol Pot in Cambodia was a Taurus. So was Maximilien Robespierre in France. So Taurians can be extremists. And a few of you may become aware of your capacity for extremism over the next day or two. And is that really what you want to do? I mean, there is always a place for extremism, just deciding on a course of action and just going for it. And, I suppose you could say, moderation has its problems. What do they say? If you stand in the middle of a road, you get run over. You have to decide which extreme you're going to go to. And so perhaps you are going to have to go to extremes in one area. It's certainly where the temptation is, and I think you have to look at yourself in that light and ask yourself whether you want to go to extremes. Though sometimes the only way to get things done and to get people's attention is to be an extremist and to be absolutely dogmatic about what you want to do. But whatever you're doing, whatever revolution you're trying to bring about, you don't have to do it on your own, because I think that there are some people who are going to be very useful, who are going to have a different view and a positive view as well. So consider talking to people and try to get their views and try to listen to what they think is going to happen next. And by listening to people and just being quiet for a moment, just letting them communicate freely, you might get some new ideas and you might be able to change your perspective. Though I do understand, Taurus, you do have a lot to say. After all, Mercury is now for sure in your sign, and you do have a lot to tell the world, but you don't have to use too many words. It's all about working it out and getting your arguments out. As I think I was saying yesterday, you are an effective arguer. And in many cases, if you want to be an effective arguer, you have to let the other person say things. You have to let the other person make mistakes. And then when you see the errors of their arguments, then you can hit them back with the power of your words. But I'm not saying that today is going to be super dramatic. I think it's going to be useful, and maybe the larger events, the time for actually engaging may be more about tomorrow rather than today. Gemini. Well, Gemini, Mercury is well and truly in Taurus. And with Mercury in Taurus, you are very focused. I think that you're able to concentrate on the details that matter. And I think you're not going to be strayed. You're not going to be distracted by irrelevant concerns. And I think that is really useful. So perhaps, Gemini, you just need to decide what is important. And give it everything you've got. Don't focus on too many things at once. I know that Geminis like variety, but there can be too much variety. And I think that today, with there are 5 planets in Taurus now. Taurus is a solid sign which is focusing on fixed results, and decide on the single thing that matters to you and apply your brain to that, and be satisfied with small gains. You're not going to be able to conquer the world today, but I think you're going to be able to understand the world. Though I suppose I have to point out, Gemini, that Mercury is conjunct the Venus-Mars midpoint. So with Mercury conjunct the Venus-Mars midpoint, Gemini, you're going to be very seductive. People will listen to you. People will pay attention to you. And your words are going to be effective. And you're going to be persuasive. And which is a very good reason to be focusing on just one thing. Because if you focus on about 6 different things, you're just never going to get anywhere, and you won't know what you're doing, and it will be a wasted day. But just focus on one thing and be persuasive about it. Tell people why you're right, or if you want them to do something, explain why you want them to do something, and you'll be very effective, and people will just like you. Of course, I'm a Gemini. I would say this, wouldn't I? But I'm not really talking about myself. I'm just talking about other Geminis. So use your words carefully, and no need to say too much. A couple of words can be enough to open many doors. Cancer. The moon is your ruler, and it is well and truly in Virgo. And the moon in Virgo is not doing a great deal. The moon is not making any. It's not making any aspects, and because the moon is not making any aspects, then I would say you have a lot of freedom. Because if the moon were to be making aspects, that would indicate that there was pressure. And as there are no aspects, you have a lot of freedom today. So consider what you would like to do, and then there shouldn't be any resistance. But don't expect much to happen, because there's not much application there. And with the moon in Virgo, I think you can go here and there. If you want to visit somewhere with moon in Virgo, go ahead. The visit might not be spectacular, but you'll make gentle progress. And we shouldn't forget that the moon is in Virgo and there's a lot of stuff in Taurus. So there's a natural sympathy between the moon in Virgo and those 5 Taurus planets. And so if you want to sort of, gently communicate with friends and associates, other people you know, I think, it'll be pleasant. But, don't expect drama. Having said all that, it may be that towards the end of the day, especially if you're in the Americas, it may actually occur to you that you and someone else don't entirely see eye to eye on a particular issue. And, that's probably more of an issue tomorrow. But it's perhaps you're starting to be aware of a little bit of a conflict. It may be a conflict to do with values, what you believe in, and how do you deal with it, a situation where you and someone else have a disagreement about something which is not immediately relevant, but it somehow still matters, a disagreement about Gaza or some other political issue. It can happen, and there's a danger that it's taken too seriously. So a philosophical issue should not be something that should wreck a relationship or cause a disturbance. So maybe as the day progresses, you should avoid talking about politics and philosophy and religion. These are the things that people are going to fall out about. About more mundane issues, which are perhaps more important in a day-to-day level. I mean, I know what's happening in Gaza or Ukraine is important, but we can't do anything about it. Most of us can't do anything about it. But the details of our day-to-day living, they do matter. And we can do something about it. So it would be silly to just fall out with someone because of some religious or philosophical or political argument. But as the day progresses, there is that potential for a disagreement. And so the question is, who is going to get annoyed? Is it going to be you? Could be. But that's, I think, more about very late in the day, more if you're in the Americas. For everyone else, that's going to be more about tomorrow. So I don't really want to exaggerate that. So overall, Cancer, I don't expect it to be a particularly exciting day, and that should be good. Because of that lack of excitement, I think you're quite free. So in a gentle way, I believe that you can pretty much do what you like. Within reason, of course. Leo, you may have a few concerns about money. I mean, money is something that you will be paying attention to, but I think in a sort of a gentle background kind of way. I don't think that there's going to be any immediate crisis, anything that immediately needs to be sorted out. I think that you can just be aware of certain financial issues and details that need to be attended to, and then in your own way you can perhaps form a plan of action. But as I said, I don't think there's anything that needs to be done today, and I think that if you're quite forward-looking, you may start to be aware of an issue a financial issue that may be cropping up over the next day or two, and if you're clever, you might want to start preparing for it now, because it will save you a bit of trouble later on. And so, money aside, there is this continued conjunction with the Sun conjunct the Jupiter-Uranus midpoint. So, with the Sun on a Jupiter-Uranus midpoint, you still put a great premium on your own freedom. Being able to do what you want is very important to you, and I think that especially applies if you are working, if you're going into work today, or if you're having to deal with society. Being free really is going to matter, and you might then be in a position where you want results. You have an idea, you want to be able to do things your way, but are you going to get the results? And you might not get those results. And it's not really your fault. It's a condition of a moon. I mean, the moon is just not really applying to anything right now. And the moon is the moon is the process. The moon creates links. And so if the moon isn't applying to anything, then it may be difficult for much to happen. And so try to be patient. And what you mustn't do, Leo, is inflict your impatience onto other people. You might think that it is, someone else's fault that things aren't happening fast enough, when really it isn't anyone's fault. It's just the way things are today. And if you can be a little more sort of patient, and relaxed, I think that things are going to be much easier for you. Though I suppose one can't avoid the fact that Mercury is now at the beginning of Taurus, and it's in a very high-profile position from a Leo perspective, and this is a great time for communicating your desires, especially in a high-profile public kind of way. So if you're going into work, or particularly if you are in a position of authority, you can really indicate what you want. Now, that doesn't mean to say you're going to get what you want immediately, as I've already suggested, but in a way it's a statement of intent. So, Leo, if you can make a statement of intent today, that might be a good thing to do, because that will be helping you now. That will help you to sort of navigate the rest of the week, and people will be much clearer about who you are and what you want. Virgo, moon is in your sign. It's in your sign all day, and because the moon is in your sign, it's going to make things relatively straightforward for you. You're going to feel that you're pretty much at one with the world and with the environment around you, and you're going to understand the details that matter. I mean, that's what it's all about, isn't it, with details? I've talked about details, but I suppose the problem with details is that we can be overwhelmed by details and just not know which details were ones we should focus on. But I think today you will understand what's important, and actually you may be more relaxed than usual, because you understand what's happening and you understand what's important. And most importantly, Virgo, you're going to understand what's not important. And I think you're going to realize that there are some things that just don't have to be done. You might think, other people might think they have to be done, but you say, you can look at these things and you can look at the situation with knowledge and know that basically it really doesn't have to be done today. It's something that can be done later, maybe later in the week, maybe tomorrow, maybe even over the weekend. So in that sense, I think that you can be quite relaxed. Though possibly the most important thing going on today astrologically is Mercury being conjunct the Venus-Mars midpoint. So Mercury is your ruler, rules Virgo, your sign. It is conjunct the Venus-Mars midpoint, and you are able to you're able to have an impact, and you're going to be very persuasive. Now, I know that Virgos, they're often not known as being a persuasive sign. I'm not saying Virgos can't be persuasive, but they're not known to be persuasive, like Scorpio, and they don't have that kind of reputation. But today, you will be persuasive. People are going to listen to you, and they're going to be interested in what you have to say. And one way in which you can interest people is by perhaps talking about things that they don't know about. You can give people a sense that you have a knowledge and an experience that they don't have. Now, that might be a knowledge of the world. It might be some kind of spiritual knowledge, that you've got access to something that they don't have, and that can be part of the way you communicate. But you don't have to overthink it. You're going to just know what to say, and what you say will be done, and you'll be able to choose your words very carefully. And I think your words may actually have a certain sensuality to them, which people are going to find appealing. So if there's anyone you want to get their attention, whether it's face-to-face or over the phone, I think your verbal skills today will be very, very good. There's no need to try too hard. It's just got to be natural. I mean, that's the way attraction works. If it's forced, it's kind of obvious that it's forced. So just don't overthink it. But don't expect immediate results. I've been saying this to a lot of signs, and the problem is that there aren't many aspects today. So I think a lot of us are going to find it difficult to get immediate results. So one other thing, as far as relationships are concerned, okay, the good news is what I've just been saying about Mercury on a Venus-Mars midpoint. You're going to be able to attract people through your words, for whatever reason, whatever the relationship is about, whatever the intended relationship is about. You can certainly make words stronger through what you say. Though I should point out that the moon is starting to make an opposition to Saturn. This opposition is not exact today, but it's coming up on the horizon. And so with that moon opposition Saturn, you may be aware that very soon another person could be starting to block your progress. They're not blocking your progress right now, but they could be blocking your progress by tomorrow. And so perhaps what you need to do is find a way to get out of their way and not interact with them. Maybe a change of plan. Maybe you were going to meet someone tomorrow, or you were going to be forced to get in close contact with them. But think about it, particularly if this person is maybe older than you, is maybe wiser than you, but not wiser perhaps in a good sense. Just someone could really restrict your freedom and could make your life miserable. Not today, but maybe in the next couple of days. And so try to think ahead, and maybe you can just change your plans and schedule so that you can perhaps avoid this situation. Or maybe it's a situation that you can't avoid. Maybe it's something you need to engage with. I don't know. You'll have to evaluate the situation yourself, but I'm just giving you a little bit of a warning there. Libra. In one sense, Libra, I don't think that there's really anything you absolutely have to do. The moon is in Virgo. It's in the sign, Virgo is the sign before Libra. Moon is not doing very much in Virgo right now. And so it may be very difficult to get anything off the ground. And I don't think that you're going to be particularly inclined, though I think you need to perhaps consider the immediate future. It's not just about today. It's about where you are right now, and where you are going to be like in a day or two's time. And although there's nothing that has to be done, I don't think you're going to be inclined to be doing anything. I can't help but notice that Venus, and Venus, remember, is your ruler. I can't help but notice that Venus is conjunct Uranus. So Uranus is the planet of revolutions. It's a planet of change. Venus is your ruler. Venus is about 2 degrees off the conjunction of Uranus. Now, that means that conjunction is really not going to take place until, I assume, the weekend. But you're starting to feel it. There is this thing in astrology called the orb. The orb is how far apart an aspect is. And 2 degrees is pretty close, actually. And so if you think about it, something is stirring. You are beginning to feel that you want things done differently, but you're not really able to express it. Not today, you're not. But if you feel that change is necessary, that something has had its day, then perhaps you need to start preparing. Because you cannot persist in a situation that is not to your liking. And I do understand that many Librans like to keep everyone happy, but you can't keep everyone happy forever. And if something needs to change, you can't continue with a bad situation. And so perhaps, Libra, you should be starting to think about what you want to change, and indeed perhaps what you want to overthrow, because Venus conjunct Uranus is quite rebellious. So what needs to be overthrown? What's had its day? What is no longer doing you any good? And I think that you really need to work that through. And so, yes, you can relax today, but don't relax forever. In fact, there's another good reason why you should try to relax today, and that is because if you were to take action today, if you were to do anything dramatic, I think it would actually backfire. You have got a vivid imagination. There are lots of ideas going through your head. Some of these ideas are really good. Some of these ideas are terrible. And if you were to do the first thing that came to mind today, and you were to put a lot of energy into it, I think it could go badly wrong. So that's another good reason, Libra, for not taking on too much and saving dramatic initiatives for later. Scorpio. It's probably quite a gentle day for you. I don't really think that there's much that you actually have to do. I think that from the perspective of your social life, it's going to be a useful day. You can interact with people. I think that you come over as being quite interesting. We shouldn't forget that Mars, which is your ruler, is aspecting the Sun-Jupiter midpoint. And so with Mars aspecting the Sun-Jupiter midpoint, that does make you interesting, and you come over as being the sort of person that can make things happen. Whether or not that's true, it kind of depends. What actually can you make happen? Well, if you're honest with yourself, if you want to make things happen today, then you really are able to make things happen at the lowest level. I'm sorry, by lowest level, I mean at the most basic level. I'm not talking about low as in base or bad. You're very good at the moment at organizing things, clearing out clutter. Clearing out clutter does matter, because if you can't clear out the clutter, then the light is blocked. Where is the vision? You do have a vision, and I think that Mars aspecting the Sun-Jupiter midpoint is about that vision, and you do also have a fundamental optimism, but I think you're also aware about what is stopping it happening, and I think that what is stopping it happening is the clutter, and there is still a great deal of clutter to be removed, and it's the right thing to do, because Mars, which is your ruler, is starting to move towards a conjunction with the North Node. Okay, that conjunction is still a few days away, but it is happening. And with Mars conjunct the North Node, you have a great sense for what is right. What is the right course of action? What is the wrong course of action? You know. I mean, I suppose you're a sensitive Scorpio. You do get a feel for this. And the thing is that all of us there are times of our life when we should be doing one thing. We should be times, there's a time to live, there's a time to die, there's a time to reap, or a time to sow, that passage in the Bible. It's like that. And so you do have at the moment a great sense of timing, knowing what you should be doing. And right now, Scorpio, you know that there's preparation to do. That's the right thing to do. It might feel boring, you might feel that you're not getting enough support, but it doesn't matter. You're doing the right thing, Scorpio. So keep on at it. I think that you are not just making good progress, but you are building up the possibility of something much bigger and much more spectacular to happen. So overall, Scorpio, I don't think that there's really anything special that needs to be done that you're not already doing. I just think you're on the right track. And I don't think today you particularly need my advice. I mean, you never need my advice. You're a Scorpio, and who am I to advise a Scorpio? Sagittarius. You are possibly you're quite focused on getting attention, making things happen. If you happen to be working today, then you'll be quite effective. You will know what matters. It's not a dramatic day. I must emphasize that. At least in most cases, it's not going to be dramatic. The moon, yes, it's in Virgo. From a Sagittarian view, the sign Virgo is connected with work, career, status, people noticing what you're doing, perhaps your ego progression, and that's important. And just solidly work towards whatever you're working towards, because you're making good progress. But, Sagittarius, don't be put off if you don't appear to be making any progress. Because how do we know if we're making progress? Well, we know if we're making progress usually if we get feedback. We need feedback. But today there might not be any feedback. You're doing something, you think you're doing a good job, you deserve praise, but nothing happens. It's as if people don't notice what you're doing. Don't take it to heart, because the moon is not making any aspects, and I think with the moon not making any major aspects, so there's an apparent lack of results, but it doesn't mean to say that nothing is happening. Things are happening. You are making very solid progress, and it's just a shame about other people. I think just some people who you would have expected to be more forthcoming and friendly are just holding back on you, and that could just be a general picture of what's going on at the moment. People just not being there, perhaps cancelling appointments. If you meet them, they're kind of quite standoffish, and if you try to socialize, you might just think that people's heart is just not in it. So when it comes to other people and getting feedback from other people, in most cases, you should lower your expectations and look at things just in terms of yourself. Having said that, Mercury is conjunct the Venus-Mars midpoint. And I would have said that might relate to one person. You see, I can talk about people in general, but I can talk about one person. And there is one person who I think is taking you seriously, and who in their own way is very appealing, very attractive, charismatic. And today, this person could have quite a powerful impact on your life, for better or for worse. It might be about someone you know very well. It could be about a spouse. It could be about a partner. It could be just about someone who just crops up, and they sound very seductive. Now, if someone just crops up out of nowhere or on the phone and they sound very seductive, they sound very convincing, then you do have to be a bit careful, because you could be led astray, or you could be led into doing something that you later regret. And one of the reasons why you might be a little bit vulnerable to this kind of deception is that you might be a little bored. There's nothing going on in the world, everything's a bit tedious, and then someone turns up who seems attractive, who's got some interesting ideas, and you might just think, well, why not? It's boring. Let's go with it. But I think you have to be a bit disciplined there. People who sound attractive, who have interesting offers, I think that they should be treated with a lot of caution. Now, of course, if you're dealing with someone you know all the time, you've known for ages, maybe you live with, that's a different matter. But random people who seem very seductive and interesting should be very careful. One final point I should say is that in terms of work, I've said if you are working today, I do think that even though people don't appear to be listening to you, the message still matters. And by signaling the right message or creating the right message, then in the end, I think that people will take notice of you. And maybe that especially applies perhaps if you're applying for a job, or if you're you're self-employed, you're trying to get a contract or trying to get a piece of work. The way you present yourself and the way you show what you can do, and it's not just about what you can do, though, it is about presentation. You can do it in a way that's very effective. You may feel that you're not getting a response, but in the end I think you will get a response. And perhaps, for example, it might be not just in the spoken word, but in the written word. Something you write could actually be very appealing. You could use the right words. You send off a message. Short term, you get nothing back, but that message will, I think, eventually hit home. Capricorn, you are perhaps a little bit accident prone today. There's something unconsciously a bit hasty about you. I don't think that you consciously are hasty. I think that, as always, Capricorn, I think you're being careful. You want to do things properly, but without thinking about it, in certain areas you could move too quickly, without even knowing that you're moving too quickly, and then all of a sudden you might be getting yourself into a situation that is somewhat difficult and that potentially you could lose control of. So Capricorn, I would urge you to try to monitor what's going on, monitor what's happening, monitor how you are engaging with the outside world, because without meaning to, you could just get yourself into a bit of trouble. But that's not really what the day is fundamentally about. I mean, the day is fundamentally, I think, Capricorn, in a perfect world, would be about gentle exploration. I say gentle exploration. It's about finding out about the world around you, but without expecting anything. You can't expect anything. There's no point in expecting anything. I don't think that a great deal is going to happen for most Capricorns, but you can certainly build up your knowledge. You can find out what other people are doing, what kind of plans they're engaging in. You might be able to find out a little bit about technology. It's actually quite a good time for for working out what's going on from a technological perspective. In fact, from a sort of work point of view, if you are working, your ability to get to grips with technology could actually be quite important. Maybe not today, but maybe tomorrow, and perhaps what you can do over the weekend. So don't be afraid of technology at the moment, Capricorn, because technology could serve you very well if you can have confidence. So I don't know, it depends on who you are. I mean, you may be completely into technology all the time, and technology might not bother you. But if you're someone who has recently been a bit wary of technology and has perhaps not wanted to take risks, perhaps you should be a little bit brave. Play around with a computer, some new piece, or your phone, or some new program. It could certainly broaden your horizons, but as I've already suggested, that from a work point of view, it could be pretty useful. But don't get too obsessed about the details, the facts of the matter. I know that's easy to do with Moon in Virgo. Virgo is supposed to be a very detailed-orientated sign. So Moon in Virgo, yeah, details matter. But the details could drag you down. It's a broad picture that you need to be thinking about, and not feeling that you have to get everything absolutely right today, because really that is not necessary. You just have to do what is enjoyable. And over the last few days, Capricorn, I've used the word fun quite a lot, and I'm going to use the word fun again. Fun is important, and especially now Mercury's in Taurus. Taurus is a very Capricorn-friendly sign, and I think that just engage your brain in a fun kind of way. Not just learn about new things, but learn how to make the most of what you've got already, because there are things you are engaging with that really do matter from an inspirational perspective. And so, if it's inspiring you, don't feel guilty about it. Inspiration should be welcomed, and the more inspiring something is, the better. Aquarius, you are perhaps being a little cautious today. You maybe feel that the world is, somewhat dangerous. That it's a time when you have to tread very carefully, when you almost have to think about what you're putting your foot on. I don't mean that literally, I don't think, but every step has to be considered. At least, Aquarius, that's how you see it at the moment. And I suppose part of it may be that Pluto is now, it's been retrograde in your sign for a bit of time now, and that Pluto in Aquarius is making you quite wary. You understand that the world is changing, and a footstep that might have been okay a month or two ago may not be okay now, or at least that's how it feels. Now, I'm not really suggesting that you should be afraid. I think you should be wary of what's happening, and I think that you should be very deliberate in your moves. And because, it is true that things are changing, and also that things are certainly a lot more complicated than they were in the past. But it's not just about you. I think it's for everyone. But I think you are starting to really feel that complication. And you may also feel that at the moment, things that you'd taken for granted, things that have always been there for you, are now in some ways coming under a little bit of threat. And that is bothering you. And I suppose you do need to take that on board. And I suppose I have to say that while most of your worries are unfounded, you do have to be careful about doing things that are at all risky or dangerous. I mean, obviously everyone should always not do things that are risky or dangerous, but you might perhaps get involved in something which doesn't seem to be risky or dangerous. It doesn't seem to involve taking a risk. And then suddenly you realize, hold on, I am taking a risk. And so monitor what you're doing and monitor what you're getting into. And when you start to think, hold on, there is a risk in terms of what I'm doing, then reconsider the situation. And I think in most cases it's probably going to be best that you back off. You're going to have time to back off. I'm fairly confident about that. So it's just really very important to be mindful, and also to look at the facts of the matter rather than the broad vision, the broad detail. Sorry, what did I just say? The facts of the matter rather than the broad vision, the broad concept. The facts have to be in order. If the facts are not in order, nothing else holds and everything collapses. So getting involved with big ideas without considering the foundations of those big ideas would be somewhat unwise. Though I do understand that the Sun is conjunct with Jupiter, Uranus midpoint. The Sun, from an Aquarian perspective, very much relates to the other person. And so you are going to, I think, find that some of the people around you have big ideas. They are excited about things. They want to perhaps free themselves from restriction, and perhaps they want to take you with them. But you don't have to follow anyone's lead. If other people want to find their own freedom, then let them. And I suppose you don't want to be the person who is restricting them. Okay, sometimes it's necessary to restrict people, but I think you have to let people do what they feel is right, unless it's completely dangerous, and don't be seen to be the one to be holding anyone back, because that would just create further problems. And if someone wants to fly, if someone wants to go do things their own way, then ultimately they can't really be stopped. Pisces, with the moon in Virgo, then sure, there's got to be a certain emphasis on other people. At least that's the way you feel. I mean, it feels that you're waiting for someone else to do something, that you can't act off your own bat. You shouldn't be acting off your own bat because you're waiting for someone else to take the initiative. In which case you may find yourself waiting for rather a long time, because while it's true that it's a time when other people are emphasized, it does seem that those other people are not necessarily going to do what you expect of them. They may be unreliable, they might not show up, they might be unenthusiastic. So don't expect much from other people, but you need to be ready. You need to just understand that you are in a position where what other people do can have a big influence on you, But I think in most cases, in terms of other people are going to be disappointing. They're going to delay. They're going to be holding things back. They're not going to be fully honest with you. Not because they're dishonest, just because they're holding something back. They don't want to reveal the truth to you. And they're going to perhaps take the view, well, why do today what you can put off until tomorrow? And that can certainly be frustrating. But if you are prepared for that, then really that shouldn't be a problem. Though I suppose I need to point out that the Sun is making a conjunction to Jupiter. Sounds good, doesn't it? Sun conjunct Jupiter. The trouble with Sun conjunct Jupiter is that Jupiter is actually combust. So when a planet gets really close to the Sun, it kind of gets a bit burnt. And so it seems that there is something weighing in on you which is just preventing you from expressing yourself in the way you would like. And I mean, I wonder what that is. I'm thinking that part of it might be that you feel you have to do things. You feel a certain sense of obligation. It's kind of vague obligation, I think, but it's obligation nonetheless. And because of these feelings of obligation, something you've got to do, you can't just do whatever you want because you're supposed to do something else. Because of these feelings of obligation, you might kind of grind to a standstill. And that's going to be an issue over the next few days. And you have to work out how best to deal with these feelings of obligation. Now, some of these feelings of obligation are, I think, fictitious. You're kind of ready. You know, it's back to what I was saying of other people. You know other people are important, so you kind of feel you've got to be there for them, but your services may never be called for. And so I wouldn't completely be obsessed about being available. Because if you're on alert all the time, you're just never going to get anything done. And so I would try to reduce these feelings of obligation if you can. And that way, I think you're going to be freer to do the things that you want to do. Do try to understand what is getting in the way of your freedom, and don't worry too much about possibilities. It is possible someone asks for your help. It's possible that you're required to do something, but it's only a possibility, and you've got to work on what is actually real. And in terms of relationships, I've already suggested that there could be quite a lot of disappointment, or not so much disappointment, but just nothing going on, though it is true that Mercury, which is ruler of your 7th house, very important planet in terms of Piscean relationships, Mercury is conjunct the Venus-Mars midpoint. So that does indicate to me that there is someone out there who is worth bothering with. I think you'll know who they are. It's someone, I would have said, who's very appealing, who's very charismatic, and you may like what they have to say, though hopefully you're familiar with this person. If you have, as I was saying something very similar to Sagittarius, as I was saying to Sagittarius, if you find that there are people who come from nowhere making big offers, then those kind of people need to be treated with caution. But if you're dealing with people who you know well, or at least there's one person you know well who I think is on good form, and if you can spend time with that person, I don't think you'll be sorry. And that is it for the 12 signs. And I now want to consider today from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got was 21 biting through. Now you will notice that I have got that is not, it's not 51, it should be 21. So let me just hold on, let me just fix that. Sorry about this. But I just think it's important to get the number right. It's not 51, it's 21. Sorry about that. There we go. Yeah, it's hexagram 21, which is biting through. And this hexagram is about punishment. And the idea of biting through is about, you have a piece of leather which has a piece of gold in it, embedded in it, and you've got to bite through the leather. And I suppose that is about, it's almost like the concept of rehabilitation. If you rehabilitate a criminal, you can find the gold within them. And so the idea is that, there are some people around us who are behaving incorrectly, and through our own actions, we can find the gold. And I suppose that would be particularly appropriate, I don't know, if we were governor of a prison. But I don't think governors of prisons are watching this video. I suppose they might be. It could be perhaps in a family situation, in a family or in some group. There's someone who has been misbehaving, and the question is, can this person be reformed? Or it could be us. I think we always have to start with us with this. It may be us who is in need of, I won't say punishment, but needs to be, we need to sort ourselves out. Maybe we need to give ourselves a strong talking to, biting through. We are not behaving as we should, and we need to get through that lever and find that gold. So something or someone needs to be reformed. That's the general principle of biting through. Now, the issue with this hexagram is that the top line moves, and the top line for biting through is it's a bit of a problem. And the Wilhelm I Ching talks about an incorrigible criminal, and who just doesn't listen. And in fact, the punishment makes it worse. There's this thing the I Ching calls, I'm not quite sure what it is, it's this cage I think you put over someone's head, and it says that's the punishment. And the trouble about doing this is it blocks the criminal's ears, so they can no longer hear what you're saying. And so this is a situation where you may be dealing with someone who is beyond the pale, really incorrigible. They won't listen to anyone. And it's like the more you go at them, the more you attack them, the more you you try to discipline or punish them, the worse it gets. It just doesn't help. And so we are dealing with a situation where someone is not listening, and that remember, it might be us. It might be us. We may be doing something really wrong. We kind of know we're doing something wrong, but we're just not listening to ourselves. And I certainly know that that so often is the case. I think I'm certainly very well aware of my flaws, and I've been screaming at myself all my life to fix these flaws, and it doesn't make any difference. Maybe you're the same. I don't know, but always start with yourself, because what we don't want to do is we don't want to project our own sins or our own sins, misdemeanors and felonies or whatever onto other people. Try to sort out ourselves first, and consider the possibility that we ourselves might be the incorrigible ones, the ones who aren't listening. But it could be someone else. It depends on the situation. If we're in a position of authority, maybe it's a family, it could be the workplace. I suppose, yes, if you're governor or warden of a prison, or you're a police officer, could be. But it's someone who's not going to listen. And you have to be very imaginative, because attempts to discipline this person, who, remember, could be us, are going to potentially make things worse. And this hexagram does move, because the top line goes, and it moves to hexagram 51, which is thunderbolts, and that might be the resolution. If someone will not listen to reason, then it's shock, thunder. It suddenly happens, everything changes, and perhaps there's a moment of awareness caused by thunderbolts. The Wilhelm I Ching calls this hexagram the arousing. Arousing as in some massive power arises, and this causes us a shock. Not a disastrous shock. At first we think it's the end of the world, but the I Ching emphasizes that the sacrificial spoon, which is what you put the incense onto the fire with, you don't spill any incense. It's not that kind of shock, even if there is an earthquake. And there's also the reminder with the I Ching that it's a kind of shock that doesn't necessarily change our customs. So even if our country is invaded, we don't have to change our customs. It's not that kind of invasion. It's more. So that is one thing I Ching says. But maybe if we're dealing with a situation where someone is just, or someone or us is refusing to listen to reason, it's shock, something from outside which no one's expecting comes along, and that makes them realize what needs to be done. And that might be the resolution to the whole problem. Okay, that's the I Ching, and I now want to look at the astrology, and I want to start off by considering Robert Fico. I suppose I'm interested in Robert Fico because I've spent a lot of time in Slovakia, so I just saw the news as I started this video, and hold on. So here is Robert Fico's horoscope. As I said, I haven't prepared anything here for Robert Fico, so that's the time. I mean, I'd looked at the Guardian. I think the first news reports came in at about 2:13 p.m. Let me just. I just wanted. So I just have absolutely no preparation at all. I'm just seeing if there's any. If you'll forgive me, I just want to see if there's any. What does the Wikipedia say? Latest. Okay, I'm just going to the shooting of Robert Fico to say what it says. 4 shots were fired, with one striking Fico in his abdomen and the other striking his head and chest. It was reported that Fico's condition was severe. A man in his 70s was detained by police shortly after the shooting. According to multiple Slovak media outlets, the shooter was a man from Levice who possessed a gun legally. This chart doesn't give any indication of the time. So the question is, so that's all I know. It seems that he's still alive. So it's not. So turning to this is the time he was shot. Approximately, I don't think it. I mean, I'm not saying it necessarily was 2:13 p.m. So seems Virgo was rising, perhaps, and Saturn on the 7th house cusp. Now there's the moon. So we got the moon is square Sun. So it sort of picks up on that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. So remember I was saying how the Sun was on a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, yesterday, on the 15th. So we think about Jupiter-Uranus as being about freedom, but it can just be about plain violence, because Jupiter is expanding Uranus, and the Sun is certainly on the Jupiter-Uranus midpoint, and so with the moon on the Sun-Uranus midpoint, one might see that might have been the moment when it actually happened. And so looking at what was going on for Fico when that happened. So I don't have a time of birth for Fico. All I know, he was born on September the 15th, 1964, in Topolčany in Slovakia. And I just wanted to see if what kind of transits he had, if any. I mean, just because so okay, he had Saturn was broadly conjunct his Chiron, I noticed, but I don't think that's particularly spectacular. I don't see anything off the top of my head that would link. Okay, there's his Jupiter. So Fico has Jupiter at 26.8 Taurus. So I think it may have something to do with that Jupiter. So Fico has Jupiter conjunct Algol. And remember, I don't have a time of birth for Fico. And so at the time of the shooting, there was a Sun-Jupiter conjunction on Algol. And so the Sun-Jupiter midpoint would be on his Jupiter. Now that's, of course, it's a Jupiter return. And, we always think of Jupiter as being a fortunate planet. But, in this case, it clearly wasn't fortunate. Maybe it's the fact that Fico has Jupiter on Algol. Maybe that's what it's about. If Jupiter was not on Algol, it wouldn't be such a problem. And we can see how the moon is triggering it. So remember how I said that there was approximately a Sun-Moon square when the shooting happened, and so this Sun-Moon square was on Fico's Jupiter. So I do think that it is all about his Jupiter, from what I can see. Just remember that I don't have a time of birth for him. So that might be one way of seeing it. And I mean, we could perhaps look at the condition of Fico's Jupiter, and we might also want to look at some of his returns. So Fico's Jupiter. Let's just look at Fico's Jupiter. So Jupiter on Algol retrograde, and in terms of any midpoints, so Jupiter. So you see Fico. You see, look at this. Fico has in his natal chart, he has Jupiter on square the Sun Mars midpoint. So I think we can start to build this up now. So if he's got Jupiter square his Sun Mars midpoint, you could say, well, Jupiter on the Sun Mars midpoint, well, it could be a man who is quite assertive, who likes to get his way. But Sun Mars is a very violent pairing. And so going back to Fico's chart, he has, so there's his Sun, there's his Mars. So you can see his Sun-Mars midpoint is at around 26 Leo. So Jupiter was square his Sun-Mars midpoint, and so that was perhaps how it was how it happened. So with Jupiter on his Sun-Mars midpoint, he was perhaps had a vulnerability to being attacked, being assassinated, or we don't know whether assassination attempt. And so Jupiter on his Jupiter return. So I think that was how it worked. Now, I've been talking a lot about solar returns and converse progressions. Now, I do not have a time of birth for Fico, and so he was born. So he was born in 1964. So he last birthday he was 59. So. Is that right? His last birthday, 1963, he was 59. So basically, if we want to do a converse solar return, we are looking for his solar return for 59 years before he was born. So 59 years before he was born would be 1905. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a solar return for 1905 for his converse for 59 years before he was born. I haven't looked at this before. I'm not saying it's going to be particularly dramatic, but because I just don't know. So let's look at Fico's solar return for 1905 to see if anything shows up. So this is So here's the solar return for now. There it is. It's his solar return set for 1905. There is a Sun-Pluto square, a very exact Sun-Pluto square. Now, Sun-Pluto squares are not always about assassination attempts, but I suppose if you become prime minister, you're perhaps more vulnerable to it. But the Sun-Pluto square is probably not just about this assassination attempt, but it's also about what he's been going, what is happening in Slovakia, and I suppose it's all about a power struggle. And I suppose there are all sorts of elements who want to get rid of Slovakia. It sounds to me as if a man who shot him was not something necessarily orchestrated by sinister globalist entities. It sounds this 70-year-old man. I don't know what his issues were with Slovakia. What his issues were with Fico. But yeah, so in the converse solar return, there is a Sun square Venus. There is Sun square Venus. That is Robert Fico. What I could do is I could ask a horary chart about how is Robert Fico. That's what I'm just going to do. So I'm just going to I'm just going to ask, how is he? What's going to happen? What's his condition? So that's so what. So basically, this is basically I'm asking the question here about this the question as it comes to my head, and I'm asking from my location. So I'm this because this is basically about. And I'm kind of more doing this to sort of illustrate a technique. I'm not saying I'm going to come up with any amazing results. So this is the exact time I'm asking the question. So May the 15th, 2024. It's 8:55:49. I put in my location. Remember, this is very subjective. So I must emphasize, I'm not going to necessarily come up with anything. I'm just doing is to illustrate how one might use horary astrology. So it's when the question comes to my mind, I choose a house system. I'd like to use the Regiomontanus house system with this because I tend to follow the technique. I try to follow the technique of William Lilly in the 17th century, and he used the Regiomontanus house system. So let's just see what the chart looks like. So I'm asking the question, what is going on with Robert Fico, and there's me asking the question. So there's Cancer rising, and that's me. There's the Moon at conjunct Regulus. Is that me? Does that describe me? Moon conjunct Regulus? I wouldn't have thought so. Making a trine to Mercury. And then we've got to try to identify Robert Fico. Robert Fico, he could be the ruler of the seventh. That's possible because he's just someone I don't know. But then on the other hand, he is a Slovak prime minister. And so one might say, well, he's ruler of the midheaven, and so if he's ruler of the midheaven, that means he's Jupiter. He is Jupiter in Taurus conjunct the Sun, and that would suggest to me if Jupiter is conjunct the Sun, you could say, and the Moon is moving to a trine of Mercury, then Jupiter is combust, and that kind of perhaps indicates that what's happened. The Wikipedia article said that it was serious, and Saturn is conjunct the midheaven. This is quite a difficult chart. I don't think this is anything like. I don't think this is. Anything trivial. I don't think he's just going to come straight out of hospital. I'm not going to speculate any further about this chart, but the chart does look difficult in terms of Robert Fico. But still, I do wish him a speedy recovery if that's possible. But certainly, the chart indicates that it's not trivial. What's happened to him, but I haven't had time to really think about it. And I'm just doing that. I'm just setting up this chart just to illustrate how one might use astrology as a horary. It's not just the person's time of birth, person's chart that matters. It's when you, the astrologer, asks the question, and you take that moment. So let's look at some other charts. So I notice that in Russia there is a new Minister of the Defense minister. So I thought I'd quickly have a look at his chart. So this is a chart of, I don't have a time of birth, this is a chart for Andrei Belousov, who is the new defense minister. He replaced Shoigu. And as I said, I don't have a time of birth, but he is a Pisces. So you're thinking, you don't really normally associate Pisces, do you, with an effective minister of defense, do you? But then you see Pisces as a sign is quite sensitive to what's going on in the economy. They just feel it. And they may be able to understand the broad picture and go just beyond the immediate details. So that is a possibility. And he has Mercury trine Uranus. So that Mercury trine Uranus could be actually quite powerful if you're trying to kickstart the economy. I mean, I think there are different views about what Andrei Belousov is doing as defense minister. I mean, he's not a military person. As I said, he's an economist. And with Mercury in Aries trine Uranus, he basically wants things to happen. I think he was recorded as saying saying that we can tolerate, I think it was him who said we can tolerate mistakes, but we cannot tolerate lies. And I think there's been a lot of corruption in the Defense Department in Russia. And so that Mercury trine Uranus is perhaps someone who's going to clear things out. And, when you think about a civilian coming in to sort out a Defense Department, I suppose one kind of thinks about Albert Speer, doesn't he? And I'm not making any comparisons here. And I know that Albert Speer spearheaded, Albert Speer in the last days of Nazi Germany. He really sorted out armaments production. It was his organizational ability that helped him Germany keep going in the last years of the war. And I just thought of Albert Speer when I was reading about Andrei Belousov. I don't know whether that was a reasonable thing to do, but here is Albert Speer's chart. Albert Speer was born March the 19th, 1905, with his sun at 28 Pisces. So Belousov and Albert Speer have their birthdays, obviously very different years, but 2 days apart. And so maybe in a war economy, having someone with Pisces in charge of the economics of the defense industry, maybe that can be useful. But I'm not using that to disparage Russia or Andrei Belousov by making a comparison with Albert Speer. I just thought that was just an interesting coincidence. So as far as other people are concerned, I suppose I can't have to mention Antony Blinken. So Antony Blinken, so he's the Secretary of State, and Antony Blinken went to Kiev, and he was playing the guitar in a nightclub in Kiev. Apparently he was playing Neil Young's Rockin' in the Free World, and Rockin' in the Free World was apparently in association with the Berlin Wall, and he thought that was a good thing to be done, a good thing to do. And I think that there was something rather trivial about that. You go in this country that is being destroyed by the war, and you just go to a nightclub and you play the guitar. And where do we see that kind of behavior in his chart? Well, I suppose he's an Aries. He's got an exact Sun-Mercury conjunction in Aries. And with that Sun-Mercury conjunction in Aries, which is trine Uranus, I mean, that's a very fiery thing to do, isn't it? To just want to go and do that. Not really thinking it through. Notice how his Mercury is combust, very close to the Sun. So perhaps he can't think straight, or perhaps he does things that are somewhat inappropriate. And I suppose you put the Uranus in there as well. But he does have Moon in Virgo. it sounds a very spontaneous thing to do, to go to a nightclub in Kiev and play the guitar. But Moon in Virgo is not very spontaneous. I suspect with that Moon in Virgo, he'd really thought it through. He had perhaps, I don't think it was as spontaneous as it seems. So there is that contradiction with Blinken talking about someone he is an Aries, but he's got the Moon in Virgo, which makes me wonder what's going on in terms of his solar arc directions. Always a good idea to look at solar arc directions with Antony Blinken. So if we look at Antony Blinken's solar arc directions for his roughly the time he was visiting Kiev. Now we don't have a time of birth, so it is quite difficult to really be precise about this. But his solar arc directed Uranus is currently approximately 26 degrees 24 Libra. So he has got solar arc directed Uranus opposition his Sun-Mercury conjunction. And with that opposition, you can see that he's almost a man who is in a state of shock. There is just events which he's basically losing control of, and I think that is a very big part of what's happening. He can't keep up, and remember his Sun conjunct Mercury. That Sun is just preventing him from thinking straight, and also recently there's solar arc directed Mars square his Uranus. So perhaps over the last year he's had solar arc directed Mars squaring his Uranus. So he's wanting to do things, send more stuff to Ukraine. It's not just Ukraine, I suppose. He's had issues with the Middle East and so forth. And when you're dealing with Antony Blinken, what you must not forget in terms of his chart, and I think that, going back to his chart, that Antony Blinken has Jupiter on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So Mars-Saturn is a combination. It's very much to do with death and destruction, and he's got Jupiter on it. So he's kind of almost getting off on it, of what he's attracting. So as Secretary of State, things have gone very wrong, and he's enthusiastically been sending stuff to Ukraine, really getting into it. Remember, the more stuff America sends to Ukraine, more people get killed. There is, of course, a view that the more stuff America sends to the Ukraine, the greater its eventual defeat. When that defeat eventually happens, as I believe it will. But also that Jupiter on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, I think it kind of sums up his behavior in the nightclub in Kiev. It's almost just reveling in it. It's like doing something in the eye of a disaster, just totally trivializing it. Jupiter on the Mars-Saturn. Here's this guy having a good time, surrounded by a country that is full of death and destruction. And that just might be how Jupiter on the Mars-Saturn conjunction is actually working. Finally, today is the anniversary of the Cultural Revolution. So May the 16th. So the Cultural Revolution, there it is, May the 16th, 1966. I don't know what time, but this is regarded as being the time that the Cultural Revolution started. So if you don't know, the Cultural Revolution was a moment when in China everything was attacked. Everything old was attacked. People with old values, it all went. Historical buildings and artifacts were attacked and destroyed. A huge amount of vandalism. It almost was like a sort of a year zero kind of feeling. Teachers were attacked. I suppose that with the regime felt itself to be threatened, and this was a response, and the Cultural Revolution started. Forget the house cusps. We can't really think about the house cusps there because it's not about house cusps. Let me just get rid of the house cusps because they're just giving us a confusing picture. They're indicating an accuracy that we don't actually have. So there is Mars opposition Neptune. I mean, that is perfect description of the Cultural Revolution. Mars putting all this energy, Mars in Taurus, putting its energy into overthrowing things and blind ideology. And I suppose now teachers get, I suppose maybe this is the shape of things to come. We're in this cancel culture. Teachers get sacked and cancelled for saying the wrong thing. I suppose in the Cultural Revolution they were just thrown out of windows and things like that. And so there is Mars. There is that Mars opposition Neptune, which sort of sums it up, and Uranus Pluto. So it was this was high 60s, 1966, and that does indicate to me some elements of this Cultural Revolution, and it would be useful to look at the full moon before the Cultural Revolution, if I can find it. I did work it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly look at the lunation before, just to get an idea about what was. So May the 5th, 1966. This was a full moon before the Cultural Revolution, and you can see that the full moon in Scorpio, difficult full moon. I've set this for Beijing. Mars quite close to the ascendant, Mars conjunct the Sun, opposition the Moon, so this tight Sun-Moon opposition conjunct Mars, and so that's that talks about the whole violence of the Cultural Revolution. It's also worth noting that Jupiter was fairly close to the square of Saturn, and this does give us an idea about how the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction actually works. So there was a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in 1961, and that's the beginning of something new. The whole 60s, you think about the 60s, okay, you think about the positive side of the 60s. I know summer of love, youth, freedom, sexual liberation. That's one aspect of the 60s. But there was the revolutionary aspect of the 60s, and another image of the 60s is the Cultural Revolution. And indeed, here's the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. I think there were several because of retrogrades, but there was a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on February the 19th, 1961, set for Beijing, and you can see that this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction was in Capricorn. Ma Zedong was a Capricorn. I think he was an early Capricorn, though. And there's the Sun in Pisces. So just think about the way the Sun in Pisces works. Sun in Pisces trine Mars. I mean, the Sun in Pisces could be the imaginative chaos of the 60s, but the Sun in Pisces trine Mars could be about dissolving oneself in a broad idea, a fantasy. Now that fantasy might be peace and love if you're in the West, but if you're in China, it just could have been the Cultural Revolution. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for today. I wasn't planning on talking about Robert Fico, but then I just saw the news. I thought I had to mention it. And with the horary, I don't know. I didn't spend much time on it. Horary charts do need a lot of consideration, but I really just wanted to show you how one goes about thinking about horary astrology. But I was a bit too quick to set up that horary chart. But still, I think it was perhaps useful to show you the technique. But I do hope that Robert Fico has a recovery that is as speedy as possible. So thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed this video, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. If you are not subscribed, I'd be really, really grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.